Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video I'm going to talk about my 2024 reading stats and how I did on my 2024 reading goals. And I'm going to talk about my 2025 reading goals. I set my goals and I record my progress in Storygraph. The goals I established were 90 books and 26,000 pages. In 2023, I completed 78 books. So to establish my 2024 goal, I upped it 10%, which brings me to 86, and I just rounded up to 90. Then I established a page goal of 26,000. To get that, I took the amount of pages I completed in 2023 and I upped it by the same percentage as the book goal increased, and I rounded up. And early in the year, I started reading audiobooks, so I established a goal for audiobooks of 100 hours. I didn't do well in these goals. I completed 73 books, which is 81% of the 90 that I set as my goal. I completed 22,808 pages, which is 88% of my goal of 26,000 pages. And I listened for 58.3 hours, which is 58% of the 100 hours I predicted. So I fell a fair amount short of my goals. The one thing I should have changed is when I set the audiobook goal, I should have backed off on the page goals by maybe about 3,000, assuming maybe 10 hours is equivalent to 300 pages, which I'm not sure, but it seems like it might be something like that. But I fell pretty short of my goals. 73 is still good. I mean, it's more than one a month, but it's still a fair amount short of what I set as goals. There were a few other goals I established early in the year. One was to read 40 physical books that I owned already. I didn't do well in this challenge at all. I just read 4 of them. Those 4 were Crying in H Bark by Michelle Zauner, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Affairs by Heather Fawcett, Fourth Ring by Rebecca Yarros, and The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And I also had a goal that I would read 3 books by Filipino authors. This was because Nix at Nix Reads, who's half Filipino, was going to do the same, and I didn't read any. I did pick some books. I picked 2 books for a later thing I'll talk about, but I didn't read any books. Established a goal to read books from 6 countries I had not previously read books from, and I picked the countries and picked the books, and I didn't do well in this goal either. I only read a book from one of the countries, which wasn't one of the books I picked. The book I read was Prime Meridian by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and that's a book from a Mexican author. Actually, she's Mexican-Canadian now, but she was raised and grew up in Mexico, so that's what I count as. And I established a goal of reading 8 books by Asian American authors in May, and I picked the books. I didn't do well in this challenge. I only completed 2 books. Those were Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner and This Is Salvaged by Vahani Vera. And I started and read 37% of Girls Like Girls by Haley Kiyoko. Didn't read any more of that in the year. Then I started and read 20% of Soulmates by Susan Lee, and I did complete that book. I didn't do very good on that. I also took part in a couple readathons, which with kind of mixed results too. I took part in a Storathon 2024, and I did read the first books for the first 2 quarters, but I'm only a little ways into the book for the 3rd quarter, so I didn't do well in that. I also took part in, I don't remember the exact title, but it was something like Star Trek Readathon 2024. I established some books for that, and I only read 1 book, so didn't do well in that one either. I did do well on the Spooky Scary Skeleton Halloween Readathon by Nicole. I did very well in that one. And although it's for a period of a year, starting November 4th, started to take part in the Read What You Own challenge That runs from November 4 this year to, I believe, to November 3, 2025. I haven't read many books, but I have not bought any beyond books that I needed for book clubs that I couldn't get free for Libby Hoopla, and book boxes, which I established as an exception. I'm not going to stop the book boxes. That one's still ongoing, but so far I've stayed within the rules of the challenge and the exceptions I established. Now I'm just going to read off and discuss my 2024 reading statistics. These are all from my 2024 reading wrap-up and story graph. You finished 73 books across 22,808 pages in 58.3 hours. My first book was Casper the Friendly Ghost Classics, Volume 1. My last book was Goosebumps, One Day at Horrorland by R.L. Stine. It gives a mood map, which goes up and down, and what it says is, you follow cryptic trails of secrets, explore the shadows of the human psyche, and traverse landscapes of the heart. The narrative flowed at a comfortable, engaging tempo. Then it just gives a graph that shows my page, book, and hours per month, and I'll put the graph of that in some of these others too, following the parts where I talk about them. The genres you spent the most time with in 2024. Contemporary with 15 books read, fantasy with 14 books read, horror with 13 books read, romance with 12 books read, and young adult with 11 books read. Of course, there's crossover. There could be contemporary romance or whatever, but not really surprising. I mostly read modern books. I read a lot of fantasy. Horror is probably more this year. That's influence of some of the booktubers I follow. But none of this is surprising. The longest book I read is My Name is Barbara by Barbara Streisand at 992 pages. The shortest book I read is The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn at 64 pages. The average length of the books you read was 317 pages. It took you around 26 days to finish each book. The least time spent was The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. Not surprising, as it's the shortest book. The most time spent was 237 days. That's elapsed time, of course. I wasn't really reading it for all that time. And the book is Star Trek, the original series, The Contest of Principles by Greg Cox. Not because I didn't like the book either, because I really did like that book. The authors you spent the most time with in 2024, this is at 2 books each. Agatha Christie, Stephen King, and Elizabeth Acevedo, although the Elizabeth Acevedo should be an asterisk because I listened to the audiobook while reading the physical book, so it's not really 2 separate books. But I did completely re-listen to both of them. You were part of One Completed Buddy Read. That's where I read the Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett with Nix at Nix Reads. The only buddy read was a fun thing to do. So 1% of your 24 reading was shared with friends. Actually, there is some books clubs, but it doesn't show up on Storygraph. (2024) average rating was 4.2 stars. Looked like you know how to pick them. And I am mostly happy with the books I read. If you Looked at my last video, my most disappointing books of 2024. There were only 5, and they weren't all that disappointing, some of them. Next, it shows my 2024 5-star reads, with one exception, which is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. These books were all in my top 12 books of 2024 video, which I released recently. And it's not like I didn't like The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. The only reason I dropped it out of there is because I didn't remember much about it. Then there's a little chart that shows my 2024 ratings breakdown, which I'll include after this little segment. Some months were better than others. June had a 4.4 average, which was my highest average month. February wasn't my favorite month with an average rating of 3.5, which is not surprising because I was in a reading slump in February. I believe I only completed 3 books too. My most pages read was in October, 2,758 pages. That's not surprising too because that was the month of the Spooky Scary Skeleton Halloween Readathon by Nicole, and I read a lot of books and I quite enjoyed my reading that month. Other Storygraph users in 2024 reads. The most shelved book that I read was Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. 688,166 users. My rating was 4.0. The least shelved book that I read was Casper the Friendly Ghost Classics, Volume 1. Only 3 users shelved that one, and my rating is 4.0 for that one. The highest rated book that I've read by other users was Fourth Ring by Rebecca Yarros. It had a high average rating of 4.46 stars. My rating is 4.5, so I'm right around there. You explored the work of 64 new authors, including Lars Bourne, Sarah Brown, and Michelle Zauner. It just shows the hidden language of cats, how they have it, Mio by Sarah Brown, which is one of my favorite books. "25 of the books you read are part of a series, and shows The Martian by Andy Weir, which I didn't actually know that was part of a series. That's kind of interesting. You revisited a total of 2 books this year, but it doesn't actually show a photo of them. So that must have been one of the ones that didn't have a photo and Storygraph. You finished all of the books you picked up this year, no DNFs. It shows Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Wang. That's kind of misleading. I didn't officially DNF it, and I really don't intend to, but I didn't finish every book I picked up. There are some I still need to finish. You read 35 books from your own shelves this year, and it shows The Crown Games of Ancient Greece by David Lunt. Compared to 2023, the number of books I read went down 6%. The number of pages I read went up 1%. Then it has a mood map where it says your mood map compared to your friends. And mine is a little lower than theirs. It's not surprising. I read a lot of dark books. Then it has your personal 2024 reading experience, charts generated from your reviews. The top categories of the books I read were emotional, tense, dark, sad, and mysterious. And that sounds about right too. based upon the books that I read. And the next is a little chart that shows the speed. 67% were medium, 20% were fast, 13% were slow. Then the components of my highest rated reads. The moods were inspiring, funny, tense, pace fast, book type fiction, genres, poetry, contemporary dystopian, story style plot driven, characters lovable, flawed, diverse, well developed. Then it says try mixing and matching some of these features to find your 2025 favorites. It's interesting that, according to this, my top genres are plot driven, when I would always think that character is more important to me. Then it just shows all the books I read, which I won't bore you with those details. 75% of the books I read were fiction, 25 were nonfiction. That sounds about right. %64 were digital, 27% print, 8% audio. Every book I read was in English. Now I'm just going to talk about my 2025 goals. I learned that establishing a goal of 90 books probably was not the right move. It was only a question of whether I'd go for something like 52, which is a book a week, which would be easy to meet, or when I look at my past 2 years, one was 78 in 2023 and 73 and 2024. I decided to go for 75 because based on the last couple of years, I should be able to achieve that without too much difficulty. I mean, if I was close, then it'd be easy to make it, but 90 is too much. I learned from last year, too, that my page goal and my hours goal should work in conjunction to each other. So I took the 75 books that I made as my goal, multiplied by 300, but then I subtracted 3,000 because that would be 10 books. I'm assuming that the books I'm going to listen to are 10 hours, corresponds to 300 pages, which I'm not quite sure that's true, but I figure it's a ballpark. So doing that brought me to 19,000 pages is my goal for 2025. And as I said, the 100 hours for listening, which is 10 10-hour books. I'm going to continue doing the book clubs I'm a part of, which at the moment is, there's 5. There's a new one I just joined, which I'll talk about in my next reading wrap-up. Although one of the book clubs I'm not sure is going to continue. There was no December read for it, and there hasn't been anything on it by the administrator for a while. The new book club I'm joining is bi-monthly, but still with the 3 that are monthly and the bi-monthly one, that's 3.5 books a month. That's about as much as I want my reading to be established beyond mood reading. So I'm not going to officially do any readathons. I'll unofficially, I'll read history books, I'll read science books. There's a couple of readathons Justin at Trump Reads is doing. There's a science one and a philosophy one. I'm going to read science books, I'm going to read philosophy books, but it's going to be kind of not necessarily, kind of like unofficially, I guess the best I could say. Because these readathons, they're pretty loose, the requirements, but they still, beyond the book clubs, I'm not going to commit to anything. But I am going to read in those categories, history, science, and philosophy. It just might not quite make the requirements of the readathons. as I said, the requirements are good in those. It's just that I just learned that the book clubs I'm doing is the amount I want to be every month, like a book that I need to read. And beyond that, 3.5 books a month is probably, about the tops that I should be doing that. And I even slipped a little bit on the book clubs because I didn't read that much in December. Talk about that in my next video. It wasn't a bad month, like the books I just read months. And I missed the deadlines for a couple of the book clubs. That's something I'm going to tighten up. Won't let that happen again. But beyond the book clubs and Spooky, Scary Skeleton Halloween Readathon by Nicole, which hopefully Nicole does that again. If she does that, I'll take part in. But that's the only official readathon I plan to take part in. As far as channel goals go in 2025, I'm going to continue to do weekly wrap-ups and a tag video every week. I think I'm going to try to add a third video a week. It might not be a tag. It might be something else book related. Not expecting anybody to watch all 3 videos, of course, but the third video I did might be of interest to some viewers that maybe don't watch my other videos. And other than that, I just maybe try to upgrade the production values a little bit, do a little more studying. Been doing this a little over a year, so it's perhaps time to at least consider a little bit of increase in production values. So I'd be interested in knowing what your 2025 goals are. Let me know in the comments if you like, or if you did a video that you showed them. Include a link in the comments, take a look at it. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.